When you hear the name Winston Churchill, what comes to mind? Probably that bulldog face, the V for victory sign, and a voice that practically defined British grit. But behind that icon, the wartime hero, was a man who was just incredibly complex, full of contradictions. So in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers on the myth and try to find the real Winston Churchill.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1940. Nazi Germany is just steamrolling across Europe. France is about to fall, and Britain is completely alone, staring down the very real possibility of an invasion. I mean, it is one of the absolute darkest moments you can imagine.
And the person who steps up to lead Britain through this nightmare, he wasn't some perfect hero pulled from a storybook. No way. His entire career was this insane roller coaster of huge successes and just crushing failures. So it really makes you wonder, right? How did this guy, with all his flaws, become the perfect leader for that specific moment? And in his very first speech as prime minister, he didn't offer any false hope or easy promises. He just laid out the brutal, honest truth. And this wasn't just some fancy speech. It was him telling the country, this is going to be unbelievably hard. And you know what? That brutal honesty is exactly what brought the nation together. To really get the man who led Britain during the war, we have to rewind. We have to go back. His early career was an absolute whirlwind of action and controversy, and it's what really built the foundation for the leader he would eventually become. I mean, just look at this career path. It's wild. He starts out as a soldier and a war reporter, gets into Parliament, and then he does something that completely shocks everyone. He switches parties. He jumps from the Conservatives to their biggest rivals, the Liberals. By 33, he's a top government minister. But this incredible rise to the top comes to a screeching halt in 1915. And here's where you really see those contradictions in action. On one hand, as a liberal minister, Churchill was a real social reformer. He was pushing for things like a minimum wage, big changes to the prison system. But at the exact same time, as Home Secretary, he sent police to crack down on striking miners. That move earns him the hatred of the labor movement for decades. He was a progressive and a hardliner all at once. And then came Gallipoli. As the head of the Navy, Churchill was the main champion of this disastrous invasion of Turkey. The failure was just epic. The number of casualties was staggering, and the blame landed squarely on his shoulders. He was demoted, disgraced, and kicked out of the government. For most people, that would have been it, career over. He did claw his way back into government for a little while, but by the 1930s, Churchill was an outcast all over again. This time became known as his wilderness years, a period where he was totally cut off from any real power. He had no important job. The leaders of his own party didn't trust him. He was just a member of parliament, sitting in the back, a voice that most people just chose to tune out. But from that isolated position on the sidelines, he saw the threat from Nazi Germany more clearly than pretty much anyone. While the rest of the government was trying to appease Hitler, hoping to avoid a fight, Churchill was the one sounding the alarm. He argued against appeasement over and over and over again, demanding that Britain build up its military to face what was coming. People mocked him for it. They called him a warmonger. His own party shut him out. But in a weird way, being so isolated, so stubborn, that was forging the exact quality Britain would need just a few years later. A leader who absolutely refused to back down. And then, just as he predicted, the storm broke. It became painfully obvious that appeasement had failed, and suddenly, the very man they had all ignored was the only one who seemed to have any idea what to do. In May of 1940, with German tanks rolling into France, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain had to resign, and the man who had been wandering in the political wilderness for a decade was called up to lead the country in its most dangerous moment ever. With the British Army trapped at Dunkirk and a Nazi invasion looking like it could happen any day, Churchill's words became his greatest weapons. He wasn't just speaking, he was roaring defiance, and he turned a moment of absolute desperation into a national mission. He had this uncanny ability to make people feel like they were part of something epic, something historic. He gave them the sense that they weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting for a cause that people would talk about for 1,000 years. But hey, his leadership wasn't just about inspiring speeches. He was a brilliant strategist. He forged the Grand Alliance, building that crucial special relationship with America's FDR, and even making a very practical, if kind of awkward alliance with Stalin's Soviet Union. He was really the glue that held the whole Allied war effort together. So the war is won in 1945. You'd think that's the end of the story, right? Nope. This is where the story takes another really surprising turn, because the legacy of this guy would turn out to be just as controversial as his career. Get this. In the summer of 1945, just a few months after victory in Europe, Britain holds an election. And in a result that stunned the world, the wartime hero who saved the country was overwhelmingly voted out of office. The British people who loved him as a war leader just didn't see him as the right man for peace. And today, his legacy is looked at through an even more critical lens. He was a diehard imperialist who never really left the Victorian era he grew up in. His views on race? Well, let's just say they're rightly condemned today. And his government's role in the Bengal famine, or his decision to bomb German cities, these are still subjects of really intense, painful debate. So you're left with this impossible puzzle. Was he the savior of democracy who stood up to fascism, or was he a reactionary imperialist, a Nobel Prize-winning writer, or a politician whose decisions led to catastrophe? The really maddening answer is he was all of those things. When he died in 1965, he was given a state funeral, which is a massive honor, a testament to just how huge his impact on the world was. But his death didn't end the argument about his life. If anything, it just turned up the volume for the generations to come. Which brings us right back to the big question. In our time, we kind of like our heroes and villains to be simple and clear. So what do you do with a figure like Churchill, a man who was absolutely essential in saving the world from its greatest evil, but whose legacy is also filled with these really dark, troubling parts? It's a question history is still grappling with.